He's the co-chair. Is he the chair? What chair is he? He'll tell us. What?
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Talk much, Dan? Listen, we tape these things live, so I get one shot and one shot only. Great to have you in. Thank you very much. I must be intimidated by the sheriff. That's got to be it, because he's so mean. You know, he's so mean. The honorary chairman of the Trump re-election campaign for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is our guest this evening. And it's great to have him because we know him as an outspoken individual, but a pretty decent guy to hang around with. And I just wish someone in Rhode Island would take notes when it comes to defending positions on all sorts of fronts, especially the Republicans, who seem like they're going to probably run and cower every time I ask them to speak up for Donald Trump. I have been desperate to get Republican/Trump supportive disposition on this program because, as many of you know, I think the guy is a disaster. And I don't like to see the show like this, right? And so for the sheriff to step up and become the honorary chair, he must have thoughts on the impeachment inquiry. He must have thoughts on reasons for, obviously, for the president's electability or re-electability, and I'm looking to continue that dialogue with him. So, welcome aboard. Great to have you in on this Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Here's a headline on the latest. Now, this is going to be a Donnybrook in the courts because already the Trump folks would suggest that it was an Obama-appointed judge. By the way, we've gotten so poisoned in this country that we don't take judicial discretion for its net value and worth unless and until we tell you who appointed the judge. That is a disease on both sides of the aisle forevermore, and it really is too bad. Now, look, appeals are appeals, and it'll be really fascinating to see if the appellate court takes this speedily and whether the White House counsel and others close to the president are compelled to testify in an impeachment inquiry and or a Senate trial of such if articles of impeachment are delivered. Here's the latest kind of in a roundup of what's been going on that and White House stuff.
The White House is appealing a judge's ruling which could compel the president's staffers to testify in congressional investigations.
I was with the president when he was briefed on the decision coming down, actually, and nobody was surprised. It is not unexpected, but it may be unsustainable, and we'll see where it goes.
Former White House counsel Don McGahn refused to comply with a congressional subpoena to testify before Congress. But Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson wrote, quote, "The contention that a president's top advisors cannot be subjected to compulsory congressional process simply has no basis in the law."
It may not go anywhere with that particular judge. It doesn't mean it doesn't go anywhere. That's why we have an appeals process.
If the ruling stands, it could be a significant boost for Democrats on Capitol Hill as they seek to compel witnesses to testify in the ongoing impeachment inquiry. Congressman Adam Schiff, who is leading the impeachment inquiry for Democrats, sent out a statement saying the witnesses who have defied Congress at the behest of the president will have to decide whether their duty is to the country or to a president who believes that he is above the law. President Trump responded on Twitter saying he would love to have Mike Pompeo, Rick Perry, Mick Mulvaney, and many others testify about the phony impeachment hoax. But future presidents should in no way be compromised. What has happened to me should never happen to another president.
You know what? My Irish rear end that he wants those guys to testify. And last week he wanted to testify. Yeah. Anyway. He was appointed the honorary chair of the Commonwealth, and I'd rather discuss it with the sheriff. By the way, before we're done, I want to get your take on what happened at the Wyatt Detention Center. I'm sure you paid attention to that and some of the immigration challenge that we have there and all that. I'll brief you if you're not aware. Welcome. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Happy Thanksgiving and all that stuff.
To you as well.
Give me your gut check on what's going on. You know what? First, Why did you accept the honorary chairmanship of the president's re-election campaign?
Well, for someone who...
Well, you're a Republican.
Well, I'm Republican,
Yes.
so I wouldn't have expected that the Democratic Party would ask me to be a chair. But the reason I did is because I've watched what this president's done since even before he came into office. He said at the Republican convention that the day when he took office at the White House, in his acceptance speech, he said, I'm going to reinstate the rule of law. He made a lot of promises throughout the campaign, and he's the one president who has hyper-focused on the very things he promised to do for the people. Aside from the politics, he's come in with a business approach to things because he's a businessman. And we haven't seen a lot of that in the presidency's carrying forward the people's agenda. We've always watched everything get sort of intermingled with Congress on both sides of the aisle, arguing and bickering over petty issues that create no results for the American people. And so I'm a big believer that performance-based rewards matter. The president is he's revitalized this economy. Unemployment's the lowest it's ever been. We're seeing a whole new approach. In some respects, some think an unorthodox approach to our international policies and so forth. But nobody can argue the fact that while Congress has been fighting for 3 years, the president, in spite of the obstructionists, continues to move the ball down the court. And not many people could do that, and not in the way that he has, and created the results he has. So for me, knowing that the real benefits are coming back to the people, from my perspective, why wouldn't I accept that, given the fact that I would like to see him continue that going into the next 4 years?
Okay. Well, there's a lot to peel apart there. Why do you refer to anybody as an obstructionist? Why have you bought into that lingo?
Well, because I haven't bought into it. It's sort of my own.
You use the word.
Yeah, so I didn't buy into it. I came to that conclusion on my own.
Well, he's the one that's introduced it into the public domain. Have you used the term obstructionists
Oh, sure.
with Democrats in general?
And Republicans. That's one of the big issues I've had going back 20 years, and 22 years now, working on immigration reform, which for 22 years has gone nowhere. And we've paid these people to move the agenda forward on an issue that's impacting our communities and creating issues for all of us in law enforcement. For 22 years, people dying at the hands of criminally illegal aliens. Congress knows it, turns a blind eye and deaf ear on both sides. And even the Gang of Eight proposal. I was very much involved down there then, and I can tell you, both sides, from my perspective, it reminded me of the mob. You have the Gambinos and the Patriarchas fighting with each other all the time until somebody puts a spotlight on them, and they all come together because it's to their benefit when law enforcement steps in and they've both been identified, right? So similarly with Congress,
So the Gang of Eight acted like a mob? At least they got close to a reform package,
well,
right?
Yeah, but you know what? That reform never would have worked. You cannot take, and I've been immersed in immigration reform since I took office. I know it well. And I also know how Congress has acted for 22 years. They actually were trying to come up with this sort of, hey, we're all together on this. You can't take immigration reform and take a broad-based approach to reform. It won't work. There's steps involved. You have to secure the borders. Then you have, and at the same time, while you're doing that, you can do E-Verify. You got to make sure that people are held accountable. They own businesses and are not bringing people in, encouraging it. So all those things take time to do. You can't just do it in one broad stroke, and everybody that's involved in it knows that.
Well, you can implement E-Verify. I knew we would get here because this is your hot button. This is your, I don't know if it's your life mission. It's something you've encountered since you came into law enforcement, elected by the people of Bristol County. How would you characterize your immigration mindset? I mean,
well, I'm the son of an immigrant, actually, and I'm a law and order person. I believe that if the laws change around immigration, we'll enforce those laws. But the issue is, we can't create a special class of people who are forgiven of obeying the laws of this country and then tell everybody else, just ignore what those people behind the curtain, just keep doing what you're supposed to do and don't worry about that. And that's where the problems start to come in. And then it evolves to sanctuary cities and all these other things. So
Yeah,
it's all about,
it's funny. If you
protecting the communities.
we've had this conversation before, but if you ran a checklist of say 10 items that were elemental to what you thought would be reform, I would be with you on 6 or 7 of them. I mean, so this is still a problem in dire need of compromise.
Sure.
Don't you think?
Well, on certain parts of it, yes, but we can't.
I mean, you can institute an e-verify. Listen, I mean, Governor Kacheri instituted an e-verify program here in Rhode Island 10, 12 years ago, and I think you'd have to be a fool not to suggest that was a responsible thing to do.
Absolutely, it is.
So,
Absolutely.
I mean, and I think there's still elements of things that need to be understood. But when it comes to criminality, I get people on the radio call me all the time on this whole thing. Lawbreakers. They're breaking the law. Listen, there's a difference between criminal and civil penalty, and we have a nuance when it comes to coming across the border on civil and criminal penalty. And I just think that those things need to be pointed out. I just see you as way too sophisticated to hone down on that simple argument about law breaking. It's not that simple. The whole thing is not that simple.
Well, I might disagree with you on that from the standpoint that the ability to have a republic and a democracy is predicated on the foundation of our laws. That when you begin to erode one, you start to erode the other, and you suggest that there's a sort of different way of enforcing our laws depending on who the groups are.
Well, it's a level of absolutism, I think, that I think we've got to be careful of, because with this immigration problem, we get into this "what are we going to do with the folks who are here" thing, and that's really probably the thing that's got the whole thing coagulated. What are we going to do with the people here? And the suggestion that we're going to yellow bus them out of here is just not going to happen. You know it, and I know it.
Well,
so.
of course, but what I would say is the focus of this administration has been on the criminally illegal aliens, and that was the priority.
And I think there's good argument for that.
Yeah.
Right?
Right, and I think that's where we have to go. If you look at, there's a map that'll show you.
Meaning the people who are here illegally, who commit crimes.
Correct.
In addition to their presence and status here. That's what you're referring to.
Yes.
Yes.
And those who have criminal records who've come back, or those who have been deported and it's a felony coming back.
We should have very little mercy for those.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think the fact that we have not been able to address this for over 22 years now, I think is the biggest problem of all of this. We have to ask ourselves, on both sides of the aisle, why are we paying these people to go to Washington? What are they doing? They're spending their time arguing and bickering over petty issues that have nothing to do with, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, whose home's being broken into, or her son got run over by a drunk driver.
Okay, so when we come back, we'll find out if the Ukrainian situation is one of those petty issues. Stay with us. You are no stranger to the president. You've been at the White House on immigration matters and more as part of law enforcement. So listen, when you were named the chairperson of the Commonwealth's effort to re-elect him, I certainly didn't blink an eye. It made sense to me. He will do well with you. I'm not so sure that everyone is as deft as you are in terms of honing down why you support him. But when you say that, there's a lot of things that are distractions, are you suggesting that this Ukrainian investigation is a distraction, that this whole impeachment inquiry isn't with merit?
Well, certainly based on the different accusations, it warrants looking into, which is what they've been doing. But where I have real trouble with this Ukrainian investigation is the fact that, and we don't know all the facts, but we do know, we saw the
I think we know most of them at this point.
Yeah.
We got a perfect call. I can read the script.
Well, perfect call, yeah. And if I were President of the United States, I knew what I knew with regards to the country being the most corrupt in the world, and what happened.
Meaning Ukraine.
Ukraine. And what had happened under the previous administration with the vice president, the statement that he made about we're going to hold your money, and the fact that his son is involved in a pretty unusual circumstance when it comes to the money, that if you want to say that there is influence and concern there around corruption if we're going to be giving money to that country. You knew that story, right or wrong. We don't know what the depth of that is and how accurate it is, depending on who you listen to. Some say it's Russia that's behind it. The people that
Not some. The entire intelligence community believes that you're talking about infiltration in the 2016 campaign, or you're talking about the DNC server.
I'm talking about all of that. What's happened is all the things that were said. Think about the Russian collusion, right? They were quick to launch into this thing, right? And now we're hearing that this one FBI agent was supposedly, changing things and so forth. So how do we?
The IG sees no malpractice on the part of leadership in the FBI or the CIA.
Fair enough, but the point being, they had to look into it, right? We didn't know what the outcome was going to be. As well, they did in Ukraine.
You get a bed cookie in the sheriff's department every once in a while, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, come on.
But my point is that they did look into it appropriately, right? So, and this is what they found, one FBI person. But they didn't know it at the time. So my point is, in the Ukraine situation, if you were president of the United States right now and they said, we want you, they asked us for money to help them, right? So we said, okay, but before we do that, we want to find out about this corruption, because we're not going to give money to a country that's going to end up turning it around and using it for corruption.
Who's we? Congress approved this funding. The president can't, Sheriff, the president can't run his own race in this whole thing and hold that thing up. And by the way, Biden's thing is not connected to Hunter, although Hunter is going to be his demise, because I agree, he's trading on his name. He's trading on his name. He's hey dummy, you just cost your father the presidency by trading on the Biden name. That's disgusting. I agree. But it's not corrupt in any provable way. The disconnect of time and frame and the context with which the vice president, boasted about his threat of holding $1 billion back from Ukraine at the time was an international consensus. It was not something that it wasn't under the table or not understood by every world leader that prosecutor was dirty and had to go. It's not as confusing as those who want to muddy the waters want to make it think it is. And I'm just going to ask you this. Do you think the President of the United States ought to uphold aid, military aid, to a country in an effort to get an investigation that benefits him? I mean, that if you don't like the premise of the question, you can debate that, but this is not a silly investigation. This is a real big problem. And the idea that he finally let the money go was only a result of the whistleblower's activity and the ensuing events after.
I think we don't know that yet. And what I would say is that I don't believe...
We don't know what?
We don't know for sure all these details. We're going to find out soon, because if you look what's going on right now with the Democrats and with Schiff, suddenly they're backpedaling now. They're very
backpedaling where? They just finished the inquiry. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I know, but today Schiff sort of doesn't know if he wants to pursue it because he wants to talk to his constituents back home. He wants to talk to his colleagues.
It's a political process.
Well, but what I would say is, fair enough it is, but he doesn't seem to have the same sort of eager motivation that he did when he was sitting up there and orchestrating this.
Well, look, it very well may be that they pull the string on this and say, you know what, we're just going to let 2020 take care of itself. Who knows?
But I think one of the important things.
But nobody wants to give an inch. Look, I think what's really fascinating about the Ukrainian situation is that if we could just get, for instance, if you and I could just stipulate to the story, and then just simply debate whether it's impeachable, then I think reasonable people can find a way, over their Thanksgiving tables this week to say, okay, bad act. It's 65 and a 50, or it's 95 and a 50. Which one is it? I think it's 75, and sometimes even a trooper will say, hey, here's a smaller ticket, then you're going to jail at 75. But we need to at least stipulate to what seems to be very apparent in front of us. But we can't get there. Republicans go that way, Democrats go that way, and most of us are left in the middle going, this stinks, this is bad. Would you guys please just stipulate so we can have a good conversation? Don't you want to have that? Isn't that where we want to be?
Of course we all do. In America, I think we want to have, but to your point, I think there's so many tangential things that go on by this back and forth. If you look at the Russian collusion, Adam Schiff said I've got the overwhelming evidence that the president did this. He didn't have anything. So the average person watching that, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, and watch that whole hoax for however long, and the money we paid out, millions, for strictly a political gain for the other party, basically was a sort of a precursor to now what we're dealing with, which is why would I trust and believe? But there's something else that's important.
I don't think the president initiated problems with the Russians, but he certainly didn't turn out the way. I mean, the interview he gave with Stephanopoulos, hey, listen, it's called Oppo Research. I mean, the guy is a bull in a china shop. The guy wouldn't know right from wrong if it hit him in the head. He just happens to have done a couple of things here that's worked out with Senate support, you know, on a couple of tax programs. By the way, the debt is going through the roof at this point, so
there's
FYI on that.
no projections in 2020 for the economy to do anything but continue to go up. But I would say this, you know, one of the things
at the risk of some significant debt.
Something I think we all have to pay attention to in fairness, and that is Washington operates very differently in the intelligence world, as does the military. They all sort of don't expect anybody to step into that world and tell them what to do. And for the most part, presidents have pretty much relinquished all of that. But we have a president who's finally said, you know what, all this politics and the nonsense that's been going on, you know, I may have a different style than other people, but you know what, I'm here for these people that put me here, and I'm going to meet my promises, and you may not agree with me about forgiving this or doing that, but I'm the commander-in-chief, and I'll make the decision, and he has to live with it. Because you know in the end who judges him? Not Adam Schiff, not any of the others, but the people who go to the polls.
Yeah, all right, we have like a minute left. I could hang out with this guy all day.
Me too. Let's go grab a beer.
So I had a little challenge with the GOP chair in Rhode Island last week. She couldn't say deep state, even though she put it all over a solicitation. Is there a deep state?
It depends what your definition of deep state is, but I would say that there is
Do you
a
concur
method
with
of operation.
the president's use of the term deep state to literally beat the tar out of every diplomat and CIA operative that we've got, you know, running the show?
Well, I think we have a deep state in the United States. I don't think it's just our diplomatic group outside of the United States. We definitely have a deep state operation that goes on in Washington, D.C. I grew up down there. I've watched the way that things operate. They don't operate by the standards that we operate in our communities. It's a very different world.
Yeah, it's a different world, but there are a lot of great Americans and some patriots that were testifying last week. Look, it's a long ride in from New Bedford, but I got to tell you, in Dartmouth, you got to spend more time with us here, because the one thing that we have a problem with is having reasonable people like you present the arguments that you do, because everyone else either ducks, hides, or yells and screams, and it's hard. It's hard. So, you know.
Well, we're all in this together, and I think all of us want the best for America. Mm-hmm. I know you do. I do. We may not always agree on the issues, but certainly there are valid points for us to consider and think about.
Well, listen, as the chair of the Commonwealth's re-election campaign, I'm gonna draw on you a lot. So we'll just leave it there, and happy Thanksgiving, and
happy Thanksgiving to you and your viewers.
We'll see how this rolls out. It certainly is something every day, isn't it?
No question about it. But America's moving forward.
Final word next. Some interesting former shows over the holiday weekend, and right back at it after the holiday. You have a great one with your family, and go slow and listen to each other. Okay? Good night.